What's up, guys? Ben and I are back here with you for a little bonus segment of the factory tour. We're talking about prove it quarterbacks. This came up on the main show. Some guys that have a lot to prove this year at quarterback, some players with uncertain futures with their current teams, at least. So, we're going to play a little prediction game. I'm going to run through some quarterbacks that have somewhat murky futures with their current teams. And Ben's just going to make a prediction, yes or no, whether that quarterback will be the week 1 starter for their current team next year. Ben, do you understand the nature of the game?
I believe so, but I guess we'll find out.
Okay. All you got to do is say yes or no, whether you think that quarterback will start week 1 for his current team. So I think you're going to do great. And we're going to start out with the current starter for the Washington Commanders, Sam Howell.
I'm going to say yes. I think he will start next year.
Okay, perfect. We're going to circle back to some of these names at the end, but we're going to just go through all of them real quick, get your predictions out here so that everybody can come back and kind of dunk on you next offseason for any of them that are wrong. So, Kyler Murray.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I will also say yes. And I'm also going to say yes for Sam Howell, by the way. I'm also going to play. Next, Matthew Stafford.
Weirdly, yes.
I'm going to say no. I'm going to say somehow the Rams find themselves a new quarterback. How about Brock Purdy?
Yeah, I think so.
I'll go yes. Jordan Love?
Yes.
I think the answer is probably yes, but I'm going to say no to be a little spicy. Kirk Cousins?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I'll roll with it.
This might be the hardest one for me on this list. We might have to talk about him after. I'll say yes, but I think that's the boring answer. Desmond Ridder.
Yeah, I think so.
I'm gonna go with no on Ridder. I don't think it's gonna work out. Derek Carr.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, that's more likely. So. He's locked into a 2-year deal. He's probably gonna be fine. Baker Mayfield.
No way.
I'm gonna go with no as well. That's a hard no from me. Jimmy Garoppolo.
Unfortunately, yes.
Unfortunately, yes. I think unfortunately yes is the right answer. Kenny Pickett.
I'll go with Ken. Yeah, I'll go with yeah.
I'm gonna say yes.
Yeah, I think so.
I think he's got a little bit of leash left. Ryan Tannehill.
I don't think so.
Probably not. Mac Jones.
No, I don't think so.
I think he will be. I think he'll still be the starter next year for the Pats. It depends how bad. I guess it depends how bad things go for them. Let's touch on Mac Jones a little bit here because I actually think it's interesting. I was listening to a podcast kind of laying out how the Patriots could actually be like really bad this year if you think about it. Playing in a division with the Dolphins, the Jets, and the Bills, who all have pretty strong, playoff aspirations. They're fielding a group of offensive weapons that features Devontae Parker, Juju Smith-Schuster, whose knee is apparently going to explode, according to recent reports.
Crazy. That's one of the wildest reports I've ever read.
Bizarre. Kendrick Bourne, Hunter Henry. It's not an inspiring cast of characters. I mean, luckily they signed Ezekiel Elliott to kind of hold everything together, but that's sarcasm, by the way, if you're not a regular listener of the show. But yeah, I mean, it could go real bad here for the Patriots. So I do think your prediction makes some sense. They could be looking at a top 5 pick.
I'm pretty sure they have like literally the hardest schedule in the NFL. I'm pretty sure I saw that on Instagram the other day, but it kind of, that's not where my head was at when I was saying no to Mac Jones, but it does make me feel much better about that take, honestly, because I think even if they're in like the top 10 range, I think that it looks like there are some quarterbacks who might play their way up into like a mid first kind of NFL draft capital range. And I think that you don't need to be top 5 and get Drake May or Caleb Williams anymore to possibly be, sporting a rookie quarterback next year. So I definitely do not think Mac Jones is coming back. I think that if we see another year of Mac Jones and he looks anything like he's looked this past season, I definitely think that they'll roll. They were, it felt like they were on the bubble of, naming Bailey Zappi the next guy. So
right, but they did release him. They released Zappi. They released Malik Cunningham as well. They had no quarterbacks on the roster except for Jones until they just brought in Matt Corral. So interesting situations over there in New England. I think he'll start somewhere if he's not in New England, but that'll be an interesting one for sure.
Yeah, probably.
Let's jump back to Sam Howell, who I'm starting to kind of rise on a little bit. I think he's got a nice group of weapons. We both said yes that he will be the starter. So how do you see this playing out for Howell in Washington?
You have a much better sort of well-rounded take on Howell than I do. My take on Howell is kind of mostly conjecture. I think that he just flashed at the end of last year, and he was supposed to be the second overall pick in that draft, way long ago, back when him and Rattler were like the consensus 1 and 2. So I don't know.
Mhm.
I think that there's definitely something here with Howell, and I'm pretty excited to see what he does this year. He's set up pretty well, and the onus is sort of on him. So when you're making a bet on a guy like Howell, you're just betting on him, which is nice that you're not betting on his outside circumstances. Will they hit? Will they not hit? Because we sort of know that he's going to be on a good team, and if he can play well, they'll be competitive.
Yeah, they're definitely not going to be like Super Bowl contenders. They might not even playoff contenders, but I think if Howell is competent, they will easily play themselves out of the Caleb Williams Drake May sweepstakes. The
Yeah.
NFC is a pretty soft conference, and their roster is fairly talented. So I
Yeah.
do
And
think that
what's
he's in a decent spot.
what's also cool about Howell is he's not like a fourth year guy, sort of like a Jordan Love or even like a Trey Lance at this point, where it's like even if he's not amazing this year, you could still see a world where they give him another shot next year. So I definitely think that he'll probably do enough this season to keep his job.
Yeah, I think that seems fairly likely, which is great for his dynasty value because I do think he will
Definitely.
score fantasy points when he's on the field. He does have some serious mobility and a pretty strong arm, so could be an exciting player to watch
Yeah.
over the course of the season. Let's talk about Jordan Love because we don't necessarily agree on him. I'll concede that him starting in Green Bay next year is the more likely outcome. I'm just not sure if that means that the Packers just don't have any other options or if he's actually good. You're a little more sold on Love, so why don't you walk me through the take?
For me, it boils down to the talent over the situation, really. I just kind of think he actually might be pretty good, instead of just sort of viewing him as, what his prospect profile entailed him to be. He was a project coming out, but what people seem to have forgotten about is that the reason he was a project is because he had an elite arm. And I don't think that's gone away. It seems like it's pretty apparent. He makes a lot of high level throws, a lot of tight window stuff. There's a lot of really good stuff that's shown up on tape in the little flashes that he's had in the regular season. And then he was pretty on point during the preseason too. He was really accurate, which is really good to see. He was going through his progressions well, which is the kind of jump that we want him to be making, given that he's been sitting for so long. It's like if he's not really going through his progressions at a really high level, then it kind of is like, okay, all of that time was for nothing. And then
Mhm.
I'd be a little bit more concerned. But I could totally see him being like a Dak Prescott kind of guy. Maybe not to that degree of production right away in fantasy, but I think that that's sort of the career outcome that we could be seeing, the kind of archetype of player that I think Jordan Love could be, where he's just going to be really accurate, really sharp, and really quick with the way that he reads the field. And I honestly I just feel good about him as a football player, to be completely honest.
Hey, that's fair. I mean, that's a compelling breakdown, and Love for me is like just kind of the bane of my existence as a guy who doesn't really break down a lot of film or any film, to be honest with you. Because there's nothing about his archetype of player that appeals to me where he wasn't a great prospect coming out, at least analytically you look at him as a late first round pick. There's just not a lot of value insulation there. There's not a lot of hits coming from that range relative to early in the first round, and then he doesn't play for 3 years, and you know it all of it makes you a little bit uneasy. You look at like potential value insulation. He doesn't really have any past this year. They gave him sort of a faux extension that doesn't really lock them into him for next year. It actually just lowers the cap hit versus the fifth year option. So all of that makes me a little bit uneasy. Everything you're saying makes sense, and there's certainly a world where he puts it all together. He doesn't have nothing to work with. Aaron Jones is still a very competent pass catcher. Christian Watson flashed a lot of potential last year. Romeo Dobbs at least looks like a consistent, though unexciting option for that offense. So he's not working with nothing. The organization does have a history of developing quarterbacks. It's not exactly a large sample, but it's better than nothing. So I do think that there are some things working in Love's favor. My issue just has been his cost this offseason. But if you're asking me to, pin the tail on what's going to happen, I do think we'll probably see Love suiting up for the Packers in 2024.
He probably should be a lot closer price-wise to, like, the Howell Ritter tier of quarterbacks, so I definitely get where you're coming from with his price having gotten a little bit inflated this offseason.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think that he's, objectively still a very risky asset, and I won't definitely won't be denying that. I offloaded a couple love shares myself this offseason at the recommendation of you and a couple other DFF guys, so I totally get what you're saying there on him. I'm just a little bit more optimistic, like you said, because I like what I've seen.
Mhm. Yeah, I prefer Brock Purdy straight up, and he's been like 2 rounds cheaper all offseason. He showed more than Love has to this point, and he's working with like the best offensive mind in the NFL and the best cast of weapons in the NFL. And so it's like I feel like he's really set up to be insulated at this point. The 49ers moved on from Lance, and Purdy has like no cap hit for the next 3 years. So they have every reason to want him to succeed and use him in that offense. So that's kind of why I've been unable to buy into Love, is just the arbitrage options that have been available later. But let's close this thing out with Jimmy Garoppolo, who you said you believe unfortunately will be the starter for the Las Vegas Raiders week 1, 2024. So how do you see that playing out for them?
Well, pretty much it's what I don't want to happen, which means there's almost a guarantee that that's what's going to happen because it's just the way that the Raiders work. It's the way they've worked ever since I've been alive and also been a Raiders fan. And I don't know. I just have my crystal ball going, and I can see Jimmy Garoppolo again in a Raiders jersey next year. But in all seriousness, what it really boils down to for me is the Josh McDaniels connection there. So it's pretty much like if I'm not even going to say competent this year. If we go like 6-11, I think McDaniels will have bought himself another year. And I think that that means that Jimmy Garoppolo will have bought himself another year because this really is just a pairing of those two more than anything else. We didn't sign Jimmy Garoppolo because he was like a world beater last year or because he has like some great arm or any great traits that we think are really going to stand out and elevate the team. We drafted him because he's a McDaniels guy. He knows the system and he'll get the ball where it needs to be most of the time with, solid accuracy, and he'll, do what Jimmy Garoppolo always has done in my lifetime, which is be a very league average field general. And I'm not excited about it, but it's probably going to be good enough to keep that job for more than a year. And I get
Yeah.
to enjoy that,
You can just hear the pain in his voice. I could definitely see it playing out that way. It wouldn't surprise me. It seems like him and McDaniels are probably joined at the hip at this point, and if one of them goes, then they'll both go. Um, I think that there's definitely a world where the Raiders are just bad enough that they're in position to draft a quarterback. They do have to deal with the Chiefs and the Chargers. The Broncos could potentially be on the come up. And then the whole AFC is just loaded. So there may be some hope for you, either they're forced into a tanking situation. But with all these quarterbacks, the key is, investing in the right one. And it can be very difficult to do. And that's why we're trying to kind of break down the most likely outcomes here. But the bottom line is some of these guys are going to be a lot more valuable this time next year. Some of these guys are going to be much less valuable. Carson Wentz was a starting quarterback this time last year. He is currently an unsigned free agent, as a former number 2 overall pick. So life comes at you fast when you're a quarterback on the bubble. And we're very excited to see how this all plays out. Heading into week 1, we're going to get some clarity on these guys very soon. I appreciate you guys tuning in. Big shout out to Ben, of course, for coming on the show. We'll obviously have him back sometime soon. Hope you guys enjoy the NFL this week, and we will see you next time.